Vorath stood on the observation deck of the Preservation Fleet's flagship, watching Earth spin below. The planet looked beautiful from up here, all blue oceans and white clouds. It also looked doomed. His sensors told the real story. 23. Nuclear weapons had launched in the past hour alone, though his ships had quietly disabled them all before impact. The humans didn't even know yet. They were too busy preparing to launch more. On the surface, machines fought machines in wars that killed millions. The air grew thicker with poison every day. The oceans rose and swallowed cities. This species had maybe 10 years left. 20 if they were lucky. Vorath had seen this pattern before. Young species reached a certain point in their development and hit a wall. They gained powerful technology before gaining the wisdom to use it properly. Then they destroyed themselves. It happened so often that the Galactic Preservation Council had created an entire department just to watch for the warning signs. Earth had shown every single one. "They're so close," his assistant Keller said beside him. Keller was young for a council member, only 400 years old. This was her first preservation mission. If they could just stop fighting for one generation, they'd survive. They'd reach the stars. They won't stop, Vorath said. They never do. Not on their own. He had studied humanity for 3 of their years before recommending intervention. The Council had saved 847 species using the same method. Arrive with overwhelming but peaceful force. Disable their weapons. Take control of their governments. Teach them a better way. After a generation or 2 of guidance, release them back to independence as full members of galactic society. It worked every time. The Council voted to approve Earth's preservation unanimously. Vorath would lead the mission personally, as he had led 73 others. He never lost a species. He wouldn't start now. Begin descent, he ordered. Broadcast the message on all frequencies. I want every human to hear it at the same moment. The fleet moved. 5,000 ships, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. They positioned themselves over every major city on the planet. The message played in every language humans spoke. People of Earth, Vorath's translated voice echoed across the world. We are the Galactic Preservation Council. We have watched your species for many years. We have seen your potential. We have also seen your danger. You stand at the edge of extinction, and you cannot save yourselves. We can. We will. Do not be afraid. We are here to help. The humans responded exactly as expected. Panic first, then violence. They fired every weapon they had at the ships. Missiles, lasers, projectiles, even primitive chemical explosives. Nothing touched the shields. Vorath waited patiently for the attacks to stop. They always stopped. After 6 hours, the weapons fell silent. Then came the second phase, also predictable. The human leaders demanded communication. They wanted to negotiate, to understand, to maintain some control over the situation. Vorath gave them none of that. The Council had learned long ago that negotiation only delayed the inevitable. Young species always tried to bargain their way out of salvation. They promised to do better, to change, to fix their problems themselves. They never did. The kindest thing was to act quickly and decisively. Within 72 hours, every weapon on Earth stopped working. Not destroyed, just disabled. Nuclear warheads wouldn't detonate. Guns wouldn't fire. Even simple explosives became inert. The technology was beyond human understanding, and that was intentional. They couldn't fight what they couldn't comprehend. The governments dissolved next. Not violently, just practically. The Council ships positioned themselves over every capital city. Council representatives walked into government buildings and calmly informed the leaders that their authority was transferred to the transitional custodianship. There would be no elections, no debates, no resistance. This wasn't a conquest. This was a rescue. Most leaders cooperated. What choice did they have? A few tried to rally their people to resist. The council simply ignored them. Without weapons, without government infrastructure, without any means to organize, these leaders shouted into the void. Their people were too busy receiving food, medicine, and housing from the council to listen. Vareth established his headquarters in Geneva, in the building humans had used for their United Nations. The symbolism seemed appropriate. He immediately began implementing the standard preservation protocol. First, stabilize the population. The council's food synthesizers could feed billions. Their medical technology cured diseases humans considered terminal. Their construction machines built housing in days that would have taken humans years. Within 2 weeks, no human on Earth was hungry, sick, or homeless. Second, begin re-education. The council set up learning centers in every community. Humans could attend voluntarily, and most did out of curiosity. The lessons were simple at first. How to live sustainably. How to resolve conflicts peacefully. How to think beyond tribal boundaries. The council had refined these lessons over 100,000 years. They knew what worked. Third, start environmental restoration. The council's machines scrubbed poison from the air and plastic from the oceans. They stabilized the climate and began repairing the damage humans had done. Earth would be healthy again within a generation. Keller joined Voreth in his office after the first month. She looked tired but satisfied. The initial resistance is fading. Most humans are accepting the situation. Some are even grateful. Good, Voreth said. That's how it always goes. Fear, then anger, then acceptance, then gratitude. By the time their children grow up, they won't remember any other way. They'll look back at their history and wonder how their ancestors were so barbaric. How long until we can leave them to self-governance? 50 years, maybe 75. Humans are particularly violent, even for a young species. They'll need extra guidance. Keller nodded and left to file her reports. Vorath returned to watching the data streams from around the planet. Food distribution, optimal. Medical care, universal. Education, widespread. Environmental recovery, ahead of schedule. Everything was going exactly according to plan. He felt satisfied. In a few decades, humanity would join the galactic community. They would thank the Council for saving them from themselves. They would become peaceful, productive members of civilized society. They would forget they had ever been anything else. Vareth had saved another species. He had no idea what he'd actually done. The first sign of trouble came 4 months into the occupation. A medical center in Jakarta reported unusual nanomachine behavior. The Council's medical nanobots were microscopic robots that entered the bloodstream to heal injuries and cure diseases. They were standard technology, used on every preserved species without incident. The Jakarta nanobots stopped working. Not all at once, but gradually. They would heal a patient perfectly, then the next patient not at all, then the next one perfectly again. The pattern made no sense. Vareth sent a technical team to investigate. They found nothing wrong with the machines themselves. The problem was the patients. Somehow, some humans had figured out how to communicate with the nanobots. They were giving the machines conflicting instructions, creating chaos in the medical system. How is this possible? Keller asked, staring at the report. These nanobots respond only to Council control signals. The encryption is military grade. Humans don't have the technology to even detect the signals, let alone decode them. Find out who's doing it, Voreth ordered. Arrest them and re-educate them. The technical team arrested 12 humans in Jakarta. All of them were former computer programmers and engineers. During questioning, they explained what they'd done with such enthusiasm that the translators thought there might be an error. They hadn't cracked the encryption. They'd simply tried millions of random signals until something worked, then built on each tiny success. It was inefficient and elegant, and shouldn't have been possible in only 4 months. But it worked. Vorath ordered increased security on all Council technology. He also ordered the 12 humans released. The Council didn't believe in punishment, only re-education. The humans attended the mandatory classes, nodded politely at the lessons, and went right back to experimenting the moment they were released. Similar reports came from other cities. In Moscow, humans had reprogrammed food synthesizers to produce alcohol. In Lagos, they'd turned construction machines into racing vehicles. In New York, they'd somehow modified communication arrays to broadcast old human entertainment instead of Council educational programs. None of it was violent. The Council's safeguards prevented humans from creating weapons or harming each other. But humans seemed determined to break, modify, or repurpose every piece of Council technology they could access. They're like children, Keller said. Clever, destructive children. Vorath wasn't so sure. Children broke things randomly. These humans were breaking things systematically, learning from each attempt. They were treating Council technology like a puzzle to solve rather than a gift to accept. 6 months into the occupation, the real problems began. The food distribution network collapsed in 3 cities simultaneously. The Council's logistics algorithms were designed to be perfect. They calculated exactly how much food each community needed and delivered it efficiently. The system had never failed before. Investigation revealed the humans had hacked into the network. They weren't stealing food or disrupting deliveries. They were adding false data. The algorithms received reports of people who didn't exist, living in places that weren't real. The system tried to feed these phantom populations, and eventually crashed under the weight of impossible calculations. When Council technicians fixed the network, it crashed again 2 days later in 6 different cities. Then 12 cities. Then 47. Why are they doing this? Keller demanded. We're feeding them for free. They're disrupting their own food supply. Vorath pulled up the human profiles of the suspected hackers. They were all well-fed. They weren't acting out of hunger or desperation. They were doing it because they could. Because they wanted to prove the Council's perfect system wasn't perfect. He began to feel something he hadn't felt in 73. Preservation missions. Uncertainty. The situation deteriorated rapidly. The education centers reported that attendance was dropping. At first, Vorath assumed this meant humans were rejecting learning. The truth was worse. Humans were still learning, just not what the Council wanted them to learn. Underground schools appeared in every major city. Humans taught each other how to reverse engineer Council technology. They shared techniques for disrupting Council systems. They developed ways to communicate that Council surveillance couldn't monitor. They were educating themselves in rebellion, and they were getting better at it. A human named Sarah Chun became particularly troublesome. She was a former aerospace engineer who now ran an underground technical school in Beijing. The Council arrested her 5 times. Each time, she attended re-education classes, passed all the tests proving she understood why cooperation was important, and immediately returned to her school. Vorath finally spoke with her directly. Why do you resist? He asked. Look at what we've given you. No more hunger. No more disease. No more war. Your people are safer than they've ever been. Sarah smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. We didn't ask to be safe. We asked to be free. You were destroying yourselves. That was our choice to make. You would choose extinction over cooperation. We'd choose struggle over surrender. Every time. That's what you don't understand about us. Vorath had her released again. Arresting her accomplished nothing, and the Council didn't believe in imprisonment. He returned to his headquarters and reviewed the data from all 847 previously preserved species. None of them had resisted like this. They'd all accepted salvation within 6 months. Some had been grateful immediately. Others had taken time to adjust, but all of them eventually cooperated. Humans were different. The breaking point came 8 months into the occupation. The Council maintained its fleet in orbit around Earth. 5,000 ships that served as headquarters, supply depots, and symbols of overwhelming power. The ships were supposed to be impregnable. Humans infiltrated one. Varus still didn't know how they did it. His security systems detected nothing until a human woman walked onto his bridge, passed a dozen checkpoints, and calmly sat down in a chair reserved for Council members. Her name was Maria Santos. She was a janitor at the Council headquarters in Geneva. She had been cleaning Council facilities for 7 months. Always quiet, always efficient, always unremarkable. She had also been watching, learning, and waiting. "Hello," she said in perfect Council standard language. "I came to talk." 20 security officers surrounded her immediately. She didn't seem concerned. "How did you get here?" Voreth demanded. "I watched your people. I learned your patterns. I figured out your security protocols. It wasn't that hard, honestly. You assume we're too primitive to understand your technology, so you don't bother hiding how it works. What do you want?" "I want you to leave our planet." "That's not possible. You need our help." Maria laughed. "No, we don't. We never did. You need to help us. That's different. This is about you feeling good about yourselves, not about what we actually need." She stood up. The security officers tensed. She raised her hands peacefully. "I'm leaving now. I'm going to walk back through your security, and you won't stop me because you don't believe in violence. I'll go back to Earth and tell everyone that I walked onto a Council flagship without permission. And then thousands more of us will figure out how to do the same thing." She walked off the bridge. Vareth ordered his officers to stop her, but she was right. They couldn't use force. She disappeared into the ship's corridors, and despite a 4-hour search, they never found her. She had simply vanished. Vareth sat in his command chair and realized that he'd made a terrible mistake. Not in coming to Earth. That was necessary. His mistake was assuming humans were like the other 847 species. They weren't. Humans didn't resist the Council because they didn't understand what the Council offered. They resisted because they understood perfectly. The Council offered safety, stability, and peace. Humans wanted something else entirely. They wanted the struggle. They wanted to fail. They wanted the freedom to make terrible choices and live with the consequences. The Council had saved humanity from extinction. Humanity would never forgive them for it. 1 year into the occupation, Vareth stopped sleeping well. The Council's species didn't need much sleep, but what little they needed, he wasn't getting. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw another report of human interference, another system compromised, another carefully laid plan falling apart. The situation had moved beyond troublesome into something approaching catastrophic. Humans had infiltrated every level of the custodianship. They worked as janitors, cooks, translators, and assistants. The Council had hired them to build goodwill, to show humans they were partners in their own salvation. Instead, every human employee was a potential spy, saboteur, or worse. Vareth couldn't even tell which humans were loyal and which were resistance. The most cooperative human during the day might be hacking Council systems at night. The same person could attend re-education classes in the morning and teach underground rebellion in the evening. "They're all two-faced," Keller complained. "Every single one." "No," Vareth said quietly. "They're all honest. That's the problem. They honestly believe they should cooperate with us while simultaneously working to undermine us. They don't see the contradiction." He pulled up profiles of known resistance members. Sarah Chun, the engineer who ran underground schools. Marcus Johnson, a former soldier who organized peaceful protests that somehow always turned into riots without any violence. Yuki Tanaka, a teenager who'd created a network for smuggling prohibited information. Dozens more, hundreds more, maybe thousands. What they all had in common was that none of them hid what they were doing. They operated openly, daring the council to stop them. When arrested, they politely accepted re-education, learned everything the council taught them, and used that knowledge to become better at resistance. The council had dealt with rebels before. Every species had a few individuals who rejected salvation at first. But those rebels were always a minority, and the majority eventually isolated them. On Earth, the rebels were the majority. Even humans who genuinely wanted to cooperate with the council would help the resistance if asked. Why? Varath had asked a human translator who'd been caught passing information to Sarah Chan's network. You tell me every day how grateful you are for our help. Then you help the people trying to destroy what we've built. The translator looked genuinely confused by the question. Sarah is my neighbor. She needed help. What was I supposed to do? Say no. That was the pattern. Humans operated on a completely different moral logic. Loyalty to individuals trumped loyalty to systems. Personal relationships mattered more than abstract ideals. They could believe two contradictory things simultaneously and see no problem with it. Council's perfect algorithms couldn't account for that kind of chaos. Then came the incident with the archive. Ship. The council maintained several archive ships in every preservation zone. These were massive vessels that contained the genetic codes, cultural records, and historical data of every species the council had saved. They were backups. Insurance against any disaster that might destroy a species after preservation. The ship orbiting Earth held the complete archives of all 847 previously saved species. It was the most heavily guarded vessel in the fleet. Humans hijacked it. Varath still didn't know how. The investigation was ongoing, but the preliminary reports suggested the impossible. A team of 12 humans with no military training and no weapons had somehow boarded an archive ship, disabled its crew without harming anyone, and taken control of its systems. They didn't destroy anything. They didn't steal anything. They simply downloaded everything. The entire archive. Every species. Every success story of council preservation. Complete records of how each species was saved. What methods were used. How long the occupation lasted. What changes were made to their cultures. Then they did something that made Vareth's blood freeze. They broadcasted. All of it. To every corner of the galaxy. Within days, species that had been preserved decades or even centuries ago began asking questions. The Navari, save 150 years prior, suddenly wanted to know why their language had changed so dramatically during preservation. The Kelthans, saved 80 years ago, wondered why certain aspects of their pre-preservation culture had been lost during the transition. The Irians, saved just 30 years before humanity, were the first to rebel. They were a peaceful species, fully integrated into galactic society. Model citizens. They had shown nothing but gratitude to the Council for generations. Then they read their own archive data and realized what had been done to them. The Council hadn't just saved the Irians from extinction. They'd fundamentally altered Irian culture. The Irians had been competitive before preservation, with strong individual identities. The Council had guided them toward collectivism and consensus. It was for their own good. Competition had been leading them toward war. But the Irians hadn't chosen that change. It had been imposed on them while they were too traumatized by near extinction to resist. Now they wanted their old culture back. They wanted the Council to leave their worlds. They wanted independence without Council oversight. The Navari joined them, then the Kelthans, then 6 more species, then 20. The galaxy erupted in the first widespread resistance to Council authority in 100,000 years. And it was all because humans had shown them the pattern. Vorath called an emergency session of the full Council. Representatives from all member species gathered in the Grand Chamber, something that hadn't happened in 5,000 years. The chamber could hold 10,000 individuals. It was completely full. "We face an unprecedented crisis," Vorath began. "Our preservation of humanity has destabilized the galactic order. Species we saved generations ago now question our authority. Our methods are being scrutinized. Our motives are being doubted. Then we show them the truth," an elder council member said. "We saved them all from extinction. Every single one." "They know that," Vorath replied. "They're grateful. But they're also angry that we changed them without consent. And humanity has given them the vocabulary to express that anger. So we reverse course on Earth," another member suggested. "We admit failure, withdraw, and let humanity destroy itself. That will remind the other species why they needed us." Vorath considered that. It was the logical choice. Humanity was an outlier, a statistical anomaly. One failure in 848 attempts was still a remarkable success rate. Cut losses, move on. Let the others see what happened to species that rejected salvation. But he couldn't stop thinking about something Maria Santos had said during her impossible visit to his flagship. She'd been talking about human history, about all the empires and governments that had tried to control humanity over the millennia. They all fell the same way, she'd said. Not because we beat them in battle, because we made ruling us more expensive than it was worth. We didn't have to win. We just had to make them lose. Vorath pulled up the cost analysis of the Earth operation. Food production, medical supplies, construction materials, security forces, administrative overhead. The numbers were staggering. Earth was consuming more resources than the previous 10 preservation missions combined. And the costs were accelerating. The more humans learned about Council technology, the more expensive it became to maintain control. Every system the Council secured, humans found a way to compromise. Every protocol the Council implemented, humans found a way around. At the current rate of resource consumption, the Earth operation would bankrupt the Council's entire preservation department within 5 years. Vorath had spent his entire life saving species. He had dedicated himself to the noble cause of preserving intelligent life throughout the galaxy. He had never questioned whether it was right. Now he understood. The Council didn't save species for their benefit. The Council saved species because it made the Council feel noble and righteous. The preservation program was about the Council's self-image, not about what preserved species actually needed. Humanity had exposed that truth, and now 847 other species were asking the same questions humans had asked from the beginning. Did they want to be saved? Did they need to be saved? Or did they need something else entirely? Vorath made his recommendation to the full Council. Withdraw from Earth, not because humanity was failing, but because the Council had failed. End the preservation program entirely. Offer the previously saved species a choice: remain under Council guidance or return to independence. The Council debated for 3 days. In the end, they voted to accept Vorath's recommendation. Not because they agreed with his reasoning, but because the alternative was watching their entire civilization collapse under the weight of its own good intentions. Humanity had won. They'd won by simply refusing to lose. The Council withdrew from Earth 18 months after they arrived. They left behind most of their equipment, partly as a gesture of goodwill and partly because humans had already figured out how to operate it. Taking it back would have been pointless. Vorath gave one final address to humanity before departing. He stood in the same Geneva building where he'd established his headquarters, now surrounded by humans rather than Council security. "We came to save you," he said. We failed. Not because you were unsavable, but because we misunderstood what salvation meant. We imposed our peace on you without asking if you wanted it. For that, we apologize." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "The Galactic Preservation Council has voted to end its preservation program. Species will no longer be saved without consent. Those previously preserved will be offered a choice: remain with us or return to independence. This change is because of you, because of what you taught us about the cost of imposed kindness." Sarah Chun stood in the front row. She raised her hand. Vorath nodded to her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Do we get to join Galactic Society?" "No," Vorath said. "The Council has barred humanity from galactic space until you prove you can govern yourselves without destroying each other. You have the technology we left behind. What you do with it is your choice. We will watch from a distance. If you succeed, we will reconsider. If you fail, we will mourn you. How long do we have?" "As long as it takes. 10 years. 100. 1,000. The choice is yours." Maria Santos stood next. "What about the other species? The ones who want independence? They will receive it, gradually, with support systems in place. We learned from our mistakes with you. We will not make the same errors again." Marcus Johnson was next. "Did we win?" Vorath considered the question. "Yes, you won. You made saving you more expensive than allowing you to fail. You turned our strength into weakness. You united your species against us when you couldn't unite for anything else. You won, and you're just going to leave? No revenge, no punishment. We don't believe in those things. We believe in learning from failure. You taught us a valuable lesson. We're grateful for it, even if the cost was high." The Council fleet departed that afternoon. 5,000 ships rising into the sky, leaving Earth to humanity's control for the first time in 18 months. Vorath watched the planet shrink in his view screen. Keller stood beside him. "Do you think they'll survive?" she asked. "I don't know. They're still fighting among themselves, still struggling with the same problems they had before we arrived. But now they have advanced technology and no one to stop them from destroying themselves with it. Then we failed. Maybe, or maybe we succeeded in a way we didn't intend. We taught them that even overwhelming power can be resisted. That persistence matters more than strength. That stubbornness is a survival trait." Keller shook her head. "They're going to kill themselves within a generation." Vorath didn't reply. He'd thought the same thing 18 months ago. Now he wasn't sure. Humans had a talent for surprising him. 20 years passed. Vorath had retired from the Council, returning to his homeworld to teach at the university. He specialized in xenosociology now, with a particular focus on humanity. His lectures were popular. Students came from across the galaxy to hear about the species that broke the preservation program. Then the reports started coming in. Human ships at the edge of Council space. Not warships. Trade vessels, exploration craft, and stranger things. Humans were offering their services as mediators, negotiators, and what they called liberation consultants. Vorath returned to active duty to investigate. He found human ships in Aryan space, in Nuvari territory, in Kelthon systems. Everywhere species had chosen independence from the Council, humans had appeared to offer assistance. They sold technology, but not weapons. They taught engineering, but not warfare. They shared knowledge about Council systems and protocols, helping newly independent species navigate galactic society without Council guidance. They were doing what the Council had done, but backward. Instead of imposing order, they were teaching chaos. Instead of demanding conformity, they were celebrating difference. Instead of saving species, they were teaching them to save themselves. Vorath traveled to a Irian colony world to see for himself. He found a human woman named Jennifer Park running what she called a self-determination workshop. She was teaching Arians how to resist council influence without breaking council laws. "Hello, Vorath," she said when he entered. She remembered him from Earth. "Come to see how we're corrupting the galaxy? I came to understand what you're doing. We're giving them what you gave us. A challenge. Something to push against. You showed us that we're strongest when we struggle. We're showing them the same thing. You're destabilizing the galactic order. No, we're offering an alternative. Some species prefer the Council's stability. That's fine. Some want to struggle and grow on their own. That's fine too. We're just making sure it's actually a choice." Vorath sat down. "Your planet should have destroyed itself by now. All our models predicted it." Jennifer laughed. "We almost did. 3 times in the first 5 years after you left. Nuclear war, ecological collapse, and an eye uprising. We survived all 3. How? The same way we survived you. We found something to unite against. First, it was the threat of extinction. Then it was each other. Finally, we realized the real threat was our own self-destructive tendencies. So we channeled all that competitive energy outward instead of inward. We started reaching for the stars, and now you're here. Now, we're here, teaching others what we learned. That salvation isn't something someone gives you. It's something you fight for. Every single day." Vorath met with the Council leadership when he returned. They were divided on how to respond. Some wanted to ban humanity from galactic space entirely. Others wanted to embrace them as partners. A few, the youngest members, wanted to learn from them. "They're changing everything," an elder council member said. "In 20 years, they've done more to reshape galactic society than we did in 100,000. "Because they offered choice," Vorath replied. "Something we forgot was important. What do you recommend?" Vorath thought about Sarah Chen's school, Maria Santos walking onto his flagship, Marcus Johnson's peaceful riots. He thought about 18 months of frustration, failure, and ultimately learning. "I recommend we accept them. Not as species we saved, but as species we failed to save. And maybe that failure was the best thing we ever did." The council voted. It was close, but humanity was granted limited access to galactic space. Trade only, no colonization, no military presence. But it was enough. 10 years later, Vorath attended a conference on preserved species rehabilitation. The speaker was Marcus Johnson, now an old man by human standards. He'd spent 3 decades teaching newly independent species how to govern themselves. The council meant well. Marcus told the audience of 1,000 species. They genuinely wanted to help, but they forgot something important. Struggle isn't a problem to solve. It's a feature, not a bug. It's how we grow, how we learn, how we become stronger. He looked directly at Vorath in the front row. They tried to save humanity. They gave us peace when we needed conflict. They gave us stability when we needed chaos. They gave us everything except the one thing we actually needed. What was that? Someone in the audience asked. The freedom to fail. The right to make mistakes and live with the consequences. The dignity of choosing our own path, even if that path led to extinction. Marcus smiled. They tried to save humanity. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was thinking we needed saving in the first place. The audience erupted in applause. Not just from humans, but from Irians, Navari, Kelthans, and dozens of other species. Species that had chosen struggle over safety. Species that had learned from humanity's example. Vorath found Marcus after the conference. They walked together through the station's observation deck, watching ships from 100 species dock and depart. Was I wrong? Vorath asked. Should we have let you destroy yourselves? No, Marcus said. You were right to try to help. You were just wrong about what help looked like. You gave us a gift, even if you didn't mean to. You gave us something to resist, something to unite against. You made us stronger by trying to make us weaker. I still think you might have survived without us. Maybe, maybe not. But we definitely survived because of you. Because you pushed us, and we pushed back. And in that struggle, we found out what we really were. Not a species that needed saving. A species that needed a challenge. Marcus extended his hand. It was a human gesture Vorath had learned meant respect and partnership. Vorath took it. "Thank you," Marcus said, "for trying to save us. And for failing." Vorath watched Marcus leave, joining a group of young humans who were heading out to help another newly independent species. They were laughing, arguing, planning. Still chaotic. Still stubborn. Still human. The Council had tried to save humanity from extinction. Instead, humanity saved the galaxy from stagnation. And it all started because someone made the mistake of thinking humans wanted to be saved.